All right, next on the podcast, coming out of New Jersey, we have got the king of ABM, Mr. Demandbase, Vin Matano. Vin, welcome to the pod, man.
What's going on, Tom?
Dude, I am excited to have you on. I've been a fan of your content for a while. We've had a good conversation or two, and man, I think you are gonna bring a lot of value to the audience today. So I've been looking forward to this one.
Yeah, I've been following your stuff from afar too, and then when we finally met, we had a ton in common. So I'm excited about it as well.
For sure, man, for sure. And congrats, I saw you hit President's Club. Is that what, 2 years in a row? Both years as an AE?
Yeah, yeah. So definitely pretty excited about that. I started as an AE in 2020, and yeah, hit President's Club my first year, and then second year did as well. So I think we're going to Mexico. Hopefully that happens. I don't know with everything going on, but hopefully that happens. That'd be cool.
I was just gonna ask, where in Mexico?
They said they're going to Punta Mita, but I'm not getting my hopes up until I see it on paper, just because of the state of everything right now. It's like you can't really look plan for anything.
Yeah, that's funny. That's where ours is too.
No way.
When is yours? Or
They
allegedly?
haven't said. I think it's supposed to
Okay.
be sometime in end of May, I think.
Okay.
What about you?
Ours is like the second or third week of June. I was
Oh
gonna say it'd
man,
be hilarious if we were there at the
that
same
would have
time in the
been
same place.
legendary.
Just a SaaS sales party down there.
That would have been awesome.
Oh man, that's funny. Well, yeah, man, I'm excited to get into your story. I'd love to kick off just learning how you got into sales. Like, what was your first sales job before? I think you came to Demandbase out of school, but I think you did
Yeah.
something. Was it door to door, or what was the first gig?
Yeah. So I knew I wanted to get into sales. Like when I was in college, I was looking for sales opportunities. So a lot of my internships in college were sales related, and I didn't really know what avenue to go down in terms of okay, I do enjoy sales, but what exactly should I sell? What industry? So I did a lot of high volume, just traditional sales gigs that were just awful, phone calling, telemarketing. One summer I did a door-to-door job, which you just mentioned. It was for Verizon. So I was selling Wi-Fi, cable TV and phone services door to door. And that was nuts. It was absolutely insane. We had to do 60 houses a day.
Damn.
And we had to close them on the spot. And Verizon's pretty expensive. It was a few $100s per contract. And it's me, the stranger, coming up to their door. And part of it, they did a soft credit check. So you needed their social security number.
Wow.
So you needed to literally, not only did you need to get them to say yes, but you needed to get really sensitive information from them just to freaking sign up for a Wi-Fi or phone service. So that was wild, but it taught me a lot. And I was numb to rejection after that, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
So it definitely helped me out a lot long term, I think.
What was your opening line? Do you remember, or how do you start that?
Okay, so this place was this place was literally super old school sales. We would come into the office first, and all you would do is mock pitches every single morning for an hour or an hour and a half. And then from there, you'd go onto the field. So I even remember the opening. The opening thing was something along the lines of hey, we're here with Verizon. We're installing some of your neighbors with Verizon Fios. And then you go into the conversation there. So you're acting like you're kind of just there because you're installing some neighbors, even though that wasn't the case.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you hit 60 doors a day. How many sales a day or a week was your quota or expected?
If I remember correctly, and this was I think 5 or 6 years ago at this point, I believe it was 2 a week. You had to close 2 deals a week, I believe.
So it's one every 150.
Yeah, dude,
that's
it was
big time rejection rate. That's
exactly.
crazy.
And when I got into Demandbase, and it's more of an account based approach, so there's less volume.
Yeah.
I was barely doing 60 activities a day in my desk. So think about 60 houses a day, right? So it's just
crazy.
Polar opposites of a sales experience.
Why did you know that you wanted to get into sales? That feels a little unusual to know that early in your life.
Yeah, I don't know. I was always kind of a hustler. My dad, I think it was a good influence from my dad. He was a small business owner, and he knew everybody in town, kind of thing. His brothers were entrepreneurs, small businesses. So I don't know, the sales was always just something that was if you're a small business owner, you're everything, right? You're doing sales, you're doing all that stuff. That's something that just attracted
What
me.
was his business?
He owned a bike shop for a long time.
Nice.
Yeah. And sales is something that was attracted to me because you can get rewarded for just like working harder. And that was like just super attractive to me.
Yeah, I mean, there's something to be said. I always like recommend to college people or people that want to get into sales that don't know what it's all about. Like, go do the door to door. Yeah, I did Cutco, so go do something
Yeah.
like that. And if you can handle that, like, it's nothing. It's nothing to go like make some cold calls, or it's nothing to
Oh
like
yeah.
tier out accounts and like be an AE and try to close deals. Like, getting people in their homes when they're not expecting you or uncomfortable to give the social security number to this random college kid. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's legit, man. So I think those experiences only make you so much stronger, and makes everything else seem like nothing in comparison.
Yeah, I think door to door, it also like working in the hospitality space, I think is a really good
Hmm.
intro. I was like a waiter for a little bit or like a food runner.
Yep.
And that you're talking to strangers, like, sometimes they're upset. You have to deal with why they're upset and things like that. And you work hard and maybe you get a bigger tip.
Yeah.
So I think that's another good way to just like a lot of people that are in sales, I feel like they have worked in the hospitality space at some point.
Yeah, for sure. And people, I mean, people can just be kind of assholes, at
Oh yeah.
restaurants, and especially, I feel like even the nicer the place, the more likely you might feel that. So,
Yeah.
so when you went to Demandbase, coming in hot, 20 months in a row, hitting quota, how the hell did that happen?
Yeah, so it was just like a polar opposite experience from what I was used to. Like I was used to, like I said, door to door, like telemarketing, which was just like, hundreds of calls a day. And I stumbled into Demandbase. Actually, I didn't know too much about the tech space, but I just got really good vibes from everyone there. And the biggest thing for me was like they didn't force me to hit this wild activity number, which I was used to in the past. So I was like, this is awesome. Like I get to actually like take my time. And for me, that was just a very big difference for me. So, my big thing was around like personalized prospecting. That was kind of like my bread and butter. And I think it still is.
Hmm.
And they allowed me to like find my groove, try new things out that worked. And I was just like getting in rhythm, honestly. And I just kind of kept doing that every single month.
So what was they don't have like activity metrics that you need to hit. It's more of a focus on like meeting set or pipeline.
So they do. They have a goal. It's not a quota. It's an activity goal. I believe it was 60 activities at the time.
Okay.
It's probably, I don't know if it's changed since, but they used to have a goal where it would say, hey, based on the numbers, you typically need to do this amount of activity to get to, I don't know, 2 or 3 meetings a week, whatever the number is. And that was just like a thing you would work towards. But like, honestly, there would be lots of weeks where I would fall under that, but I was hitting my number and actually, producing well above my quota. So they didn't like say, oh, Vin, you hit your quota, but you didn't make your 3 dials today. Like, they weren't doing that.
Yeah.
So that's something that like I talk about a lot, where like, management needs to shift. If there's some organizations where they're very strict on the activity goal, and like even top producing reps that fall into the activity goal will still be under fire. And
Hmm.
and that just seems backwards to me.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like a lot of times it feels like activity metrics they have it's a good thought behind them, but it's not based on science. It's not based on, well, you, Vin, as a salesperson, we know your conversion rates are X, and that's how we backed into this number. It's like, no, all SDRs need to make the same amount of calls and emails when, you could get more meetings with less. And maybe there's someone else that got the same amount of meetings as you, but did it with twice as many calls, and they just blasted the list. And
Yeah.
there's just multiple ways to get there. When you're talking about personalization of outreach, like were you a big cold caller, email, video? Like, I'm sure you had to do everything, but like, what was your preference and how'd you personalize?
Definitely email. I was not a big cold caller.
Yeah.
I used email a lot because I just saw success with it. For me, I started experimenting with personalization like super early on. I would just like reference personal thing, like, if someone shared something that was like a hobby or like, an article they wrote, I would just reference that.
Yep.
Nowadays we talk about like personalization plus relevance. I wasn't doing any relevance back then. It was just like, hey, I saw you did this, and I noticed it was helping me with the open rates, and some people even were responding at that point in time. This was back in 2018. And so I started like digging into that. I'm like, okay, well, if I reference something that the prospect likes, I'll get an open rate. So now how can I get them to respond? And that's when I started working on more of the relevancy. It's just not just naming something random, but like finding something that you can leverage in your outreach. So I typically look for like three things. I look for something about the prospect that I can use to grab their attention that helps with the open rates. I use something that's based on either the industry or the company. So whether they, acquired a new business, or they did a rebrand, or they're growing, or whatever it is, or maybe a public company, you can find something in their 10K. That's the second thing I look for. And then the third thing I look for is I'll dive into my CRM and see, like, have we spoke with them in the past? Are they familiar with Demandbase? Were they a previous customer, stuff like that. So that was like my formula over time, was like, okay, if I personalize it based off the prospect, maybe they'll open it. If I, bring some relevancy with, or if I come off as an expert understanding their business and industry, I'll be trusted. And then the third thing is like, okay, maybe I can tie in relevance, so they can actually respond to me. So that was like the formula of all my emails, basically.
So when you're thinking about that, when you're an AE, and maybe it's changed over time, but like, what does your territory look like? Like roughly how many accounts are you dealing with?
So we actually just redid them. I think I own about 100 or so target accounts. So at Demandbase,
Okay.
we do a lot of tiering.
Yep.
So we'll have like, 100 target accounts. Those are my main accounts that I really want to do business with. And then from there, we have like AE top 30, which are like my 30 best accounts. And then even more so, we actually have AE top 5, which are our top 5 accounts that, like, in my eyes, like my top 5 accounts are the ones that are like change my life. Like they'll be a huge deal, get me to my number easier. And that's how we break it up. And then I have a bunch of like non-target accounts in my name that I typically don't really reach out to.
So you're basically working off those 100, and then how do you go about, like, the one question I get from people when they're talking about, personalizing and relevant emails and like taking the time to do that is like, well, I don't have time to do that, to go multi-thread, 5 people at an account times 100 accounts, and I just don't have enough time in the day to do that. So how do you chunk that out over time?
Yes, I get that question a lot too. It's like, how do you scale personalization? And the answer is,
Yeah.
you're not supposed to scale it.
Mm.
So, do you guys use like an outreach or sales loft?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we have
Yeah.
outreach.
So, you're familiar with that idea of like creating cadences, right? And the way I
Yeah.
think about leveraging those tools is like, okay, let's find my top accounts this week. Those could be based on if they're a good fit demographically, they fit your ICP, they're in your industry, they have the tech stack you care about, all those things. There's an additional layer that maybe some folks don't have access to, but if you do, it's good to tie that in. And it's like buying signals, intent data, web activity, engagement on content. That's what we focus on for, like, hey, these are my top accounts just this week. And for this week, I might focus on like 10 accounts at a time. And those are getting one-to-one outreach.
Yeah.
And as an SDR, you're reaching out to way more than 10 accounts, of course. So an SDR might use Sales Loft or Outreach to say, okay, my tier 1 accounts are getting the one-to-one outreach. My tier 2 accounts are getting, one to few outreach. I'm using some snippets or templates and then putting some personalization in it. And then my tier 3 accounts, I might just choose to put all, in a more templated cadence in Sales Loft or Outreach. So that's the way I'm breaking it up. You're not supposed to, send personalized emails to everybody.
So as an AE for your tier 1s, are you going up and down like the food chain in terms of like title wise? And then are you personalizing at each of those people, or just at the, like, make it personalized at the account level? Maybe it depends.
Yeah, no. So it's a good question. So like you mentioned earlier, there's like 3 parts of my emails typically.
Yeah.
The first part is always going to be changed to the person I'm reaching out to, right? So the bottom 2 parts, those can be copy and paste because it's based off the company or industry, and then something maybe in our CRM that I found. So I can pretty much use 75%, 80% of the email to everyone at the account and just change the first sentence or so.
Okay, got it. I know we're getting a little tactical, but it just seems like something that you've got really dialed in, and I feel like a lot of people can learn from. And there's a lot of talk I see on LinkedIn and podcasts and stuff about, how to send a cold email or how to make your cold call, but there doesn't seem to be a lot about prioritizing your accounts, right?
Yeah.
And tiering them and then digging into them and the tactics to do that. So I feel like if we, my fiscal year started in February. So the first few weeks, it's like, I'm not selling much, but I'm spending a lot of time sharpening the axe to make sure I prioritize and spend the next 11 and a half months doing the right things. And hopefully that's a good investment in time.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
So you just finished your second year as an AE?
Yep.
And it looks like what you roughly doubled the amount of rev that you closed between the 2 years.
Yeah, just about.
So what's the deal there? You had better accounts, or you did something different? You focused on the whales? Like what was the difference?
Yeah, so I think like, my first year as a seller, I was still like learning a ton. And I was doing well, but I was still, losing some deals I probably shouldn't have lost, kind of thing. And year two, I think the big difference was focusing more on a personalized presentation and focusing more on the why, which is like something every salesperson always needs to work on. Like I'm still trying to get better at that. But I think like actually digging into why they looking into our solution, what they care about, and like literally word for word, whatever they say, like outlining that on my presentation and going into specific use cases versus just like feature versus function.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think also another big thing is like, multi-threading within those deals. So I think those are the two biggest things I tried to work on the following year. And I definitely saw it pay out at the end of the year.
So it feels like the first one kind of ties back to discovery,
Yeah.
like making sure you're getting to like what that key pain point is and trying to make sure it's meaty enough to, turn it from I don't know what your deal sizes are, but turn it from a 50K to 100K because it's a bigger problem you're solving.
Right.
Is that fair? Like, are you asking different types of questions?
I think so. I think I'm still trying to do better job at discovery. And I think if you ask every rep, they're always trying to do better job at discovery.
Yeah.
I think instead of just like moving on to like the next part of my presentation, I think I'm just trying to go deeper. So I don't know if it's like better questions. I think it's just like getting, layering questions. I think is something I was really focused on. And I'm, like I said, still trying to get better at that always.
Just peeling back the onion.
Peeling back the onion. That's exactly right. So they say like, we're trying to do XYZ. Instead of being like, great, we do that. We help solve for that. We say, okay, why do you want to do that? What happens if you don't do that? Those type of questions.
Do you have training like Sandler or something like that? Some sort of training at Demandbase?
No, we follow Medic, which is like not, I guess not really a training. But no, we don't have anything formal.
Got it. It's we've used Sandler at Gong, and it's like that's pretty much like exactly what they teach you, is like trying to get to the second, third, fourth level of pain. And and I didn't do that in my days at Tech Target. Like that, I feel like I focused more on the art than the science of sales.
Yeah.
And so in my interview, I had to run a mock demo, and they're like giving me one word answers on the discovery. I'm like, these fuck, like, so I had to keep like going further and further, like to the point where it was uncomfortable. I'm like, damn, that you got to do that much discovery. Okay. Like, damn, that's a whole new muscle we got to build up.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. And I think I fall into that trap too. Like, the art versus the science. I think a lot of people that come from the SDR space, which most sales folks are, like you have to be creative. You have to focus on the art aspect of sales. I think that sometimes carries over too much when you move into a closing role. But yeah, I've definitely noticed that.
I feel like it's also about who you're selling to, because you're selling to marketers mostly, right?
Yeah.
And that's who I was selling to. And I feel like, I've never sold to IT, but I imagine that if you're dealing with like a CISO, it just seems like the conversation is less fun. It's like, it seems like it's a little more like sciencey and dialed in and technical than marketing or sales, at least from my experience. Like it feels like you do have some wiggle room in that lens, and like that sometimes plays a heavier portion of like where your success can come from.
Yeah.
I don't know. I've never sold IT, and I'm not pining to either, but it just seems like that could be the case.
Yeah. I don't have any experience with that, but I would imagine that's the case.
So what about multi-threading? Every rep knows like the pain of you're working the deal with one person, they're leading you on. They're like, yes, like we're going to buy this thing. Let's do it. And then something comes in at the last minute. Hey, we went with a competitor. Hey, procurement wants to bite your head off and get 30% discount. My boss isn't sold on it, so we got to restart from the beginning. Like all this stuff that can come up. So I think we all know the importance of multi-threading, but it's more about like, how do you do that once a deal's going down? Like, do you have any tips on that?
Yeah, I think Gong helps with that as well. Not to plug Gong, but
Shout out to
I
Gong.
yeah, shout out to Gong. And again, in comparison of what I was doing last year, I was like, I found a champion and they like are giving me all this great info, and I was just like getting so hung up on the champion that like I would neglect the other folks that were important to the evaluation. And and any of the deals I would lose last year, like I would hear them say like, oh, like I love Demandbase, but XYZ person, like said competitor, or this person wasn't really bought into the whole idea of ABM. And I was like finding that as a theme. So when multi-threading, I think now what I'm trying to focus on is when you have a big demo with everybody, let's say there's like 6 folks in the room. After the demo's done, send a follow-up email like you typically do. Like most people follow a structure we do at Demandbase. Send that to everyone that joined, and then break off from there. And I actually use Gong to help multi-threading. Actually, this is not a advertisement. I'll literally go back into Gong. Let's say this guy Jim was on the call. I'll go into any line that Jim said, literally copy and paste what he said. Jim's interested in advertising. Let's just say it's a really high level example. I'll reply back to that thread, just one off to Jim and say, hey, Jim, I know you're interested in our advertising, product. Here's some more resources on it. Want to make sure your questions were answered. Would it make sense to have like a one-off conversation about specifically just advertising? So that's what I've been trying to do. And it's been working for me. Last year, most of the time, as salespeople, we don't get a lot of responses, but you still have to do those type of things because it shows that you are actually spending a lot of time and making sure that everyone fully understands the value of your solution. And 2, if they do agree to the call, like that's going to incredibly help your deal.
Yeah, that's such a great example, because if you have those 6 people, it's possible none of them respond, but they still might be taking that info. As most conversations that impact whether you hit quota, you're not even part of that conversation. They're happening behind closed doors.
Right.
And so you want to set yourself up as good as possible. And if Jim does take you up on that call, like you said, then all of a sudden you got another champion, right? You got another person you can influence, you can ask for info about, and get the nitty gritty from his point of view. And so the more conversations you have, the deeper you can get in, the more, I think the better chance you have on winning the deal.
Yeah. It's funny in sales, like most things you do, it's not gonna work. Right.
Yeah.
Because if it worked, you would never miss a deal. You would close every single deal. Right. And it's funny, like there's so many things that we have to do extra as salespeople that like you may not get the immediate satisfaction or reward from. And that's another example, like taking, if there's 10 people on the call, you're sending 10 emails to everyone. That takes a long time. Yeah. You may not see that instant benefit right away, but it might help you, like you said, later on down the line, close to close.
That's a mentality thing. You know what I mean? That's like totally. The same as like prospecting. You spend an hour sending emails that say, if you get response, you're probably not going to get a response within that hour. You might get one later. You might not even get one for a week from something you send, and it might be your 5th touch or something. So how do you mentally, how do you build that skill of delaying gratification?
Honestly, I don't even know if there's a skill to that. It's just like the name of the game in sales. Like you just have to know that you're not going to get the quick wins right away. Maybe that was from my time going door to door. I have no idea. I think one of the things to remember in terms of delaying gratification is like this compounding effect, right? So I'm sure you might have read the book, The Compound Effect.
Yeah.
It's like all these little activities will build up into something greater. So for example, you mentioned prospecting, one of our target accounts we were reaching out to, and this is a real example, we were reaching out to like crazy, like they were showing signals. They're one of my top 5 accounts. And we were just like, me and my SDR were just on them. We were seeing email opens, no responses. We finally get a response from this VP of marketing. And she mentioned like, oh, I saw all of your emails. I love them. Right. She never responded, but it took us 2 months to get a response. But like, she was like, oh, your emails were like, I love your emails. I sent them to my sales team. Like I wanted them to see personalization. If I would have just been like, oh, screw that. Like she never answered me. We would have never had the conversation, or we would have got in maybe later.
Yeah.
Right.
That's so true. It's just the mentality that you got to put, you've got to do the act. You got to focus on the process more than the result. And I feel like one thing that's helped me is just trying to do hard shit in general. And I know that you're a fitness guy. I think you've done, is marathons or races or stuff. I feel like there's a direct correlation to doing that type of training, and you could find it in another area too. I've just found it in this, and how that translates to a lot of things in life. So I'd love to hear you riff on that, like on what you've done, and just like how that might have impacted your mentality too.
Yeah, I mean, I just like I kind of recently got into racing, like running, probably like 2 or 3 years ago. I think it was 2019, so 3 years ago at this point. But you're absolutely right, and I know you do a lot of races yourself. Like, I never was a runner. Like, I always did sports that did not involve a lot of long distance running, so I was just always like turned off by the thought of running. And my buddy had me sign up for the marathon, and in my head, I'm like, I'm not running the marathon. Like 26 miles, like that sounds one terrible. I've never ran more than 5 miles in my life, and it was once. And that just sounded like something that was like pretty outrageous to me. But you start the training, and there's a lot of just training programs you can follow. You start the training week by week, you can see like real progress to the point where, like, the 5 miles that I thought was really hard a few weeks ago was like nothing. And you really start to build that progress, but it takes so long. It's that compounding effect, running a few times a week, consistently every single week. And to the point where you're now like, 8 weeks into the training, and all of a sudden you're just running like way more miles than you ever thought. And that same mindset goes to sales. It's like, okay, like you said earlier, you might not get a response right off the bat, but if you use this compounding effect where you're putting in this work, or you mentioned like a progress in place, long term, you may have a more healthier pipeline. And it really just taught me, like, I was just like, okay, wow, if I just have enough time, I think like Will Smith said it, it was like, he said something like, I can pretty much do anything if you give me enough time to train for it. And that kind of stuck with me. I'm like, okay, maybe there is a lot more things that I thought I couldn't do that I could do. Maybe I just need a little bit more time. Yeah.
I fucking love Will Smith.
Me too.
Did you read his book?
Of course.
Man, I got the audio version.
Same.
I usually prefer a regular book, but when it's a biography like that, that there's going to be you want to hear the tone, you want to hear him telling the stories. That's a great one. And just seeing like YouTube videos or whatever of him talking. Do you have any other people like that you follow that, I don't know, it could be on Instagram or YouTube or wherever, that just like kind of get you fired up?
Yeah. So I don't know if you heard of Ryan Holiday.
Oh,
yeah. He's a pretty big author. He has like experience in the marketing space, but he's gotten like a growing following from kind of normalizing stoicism, which sounds kind of nerdy, but it's really not. It's really just like the thought process of like controlling what you can control and not focusing on the things you can't control. That's kind of the core principle of like stoicism. But he's made a lot of that like kind of modern, and he writes it in a way where you can consume it. So he posts a lot of good content on like Instagram and TikTok, just about like quick things about stoicism. I have some of his books, like the Daily Stoic, which like shares, 1 page a day about like something from stoicism. So I've been like getting into that. And that, again, is not related to sales at all. It's more so like a mind, how you should be thinking about your mindset.
He's actually probably my favorite author.
Oh,
I got a chain. The Obstacle is the Way.
Oh, nice.
Which is one of his books he wrote, my favorite book. And the whole premise being like, everyone's got obstacles in life, and like, instead of like running away from them or trying to run around it, it's just like the best way to do is like, you gotta tackle it, and you just gotta go head first. And I mean, he's got a pretty big following now, but he started really niche, but like sports teams have picked it up, and like talks about like, people in history and military. And so people have not, if they're not familiar, I would definitely recommend checking him out on Instagram or one of his books, and get into it.
Yeah, he's got a coin that has memento mori on it. I don't know if you've seen that.
Yeah.
And memento mori essentially means like, it literally translates to like remember that you'll die, but it's supposed to be like, okay, our time on earth here is like, not infinite, so we have to make sure we're spending time wisely. And I really like that. And I got it tattooed on my thigh facing me. So it's a kind of like a reminder. So I'm like, I've gotten like really into it.
Dude, that's that's hilarious that you say it, because as you were saying that, I was thinking the other day, so I do not have any tats. I'm clean. I got just my skin all over. I'm like, you know what? I kind of want to get a tat. And my sister's trying to talk me into doing one with her, and I might. And but there's like, man, I want like an inspirational saying. I'm a big like words guy, I'm a big quotes guy.
Yeah, me too.
I'm like, dude, that would be, I was like, memento mori, that would be fucking badass, like on the wrist or something. So you just see it every day, and it's like remember you're going to die. Like, don't be afraid to do stuff,
Yes.
like treat people well, work hard, be honest, like all the things that, you got to do, but it's easy to kind of forego that if you think like life's going to last forever, or you don't kind of like take each day seriously. So I
Yeah.
can see why you could like think like, man, that's a little dark, but to me, it's just, it's the opposite of that. It brings a lot of hope and just a lot of like importance to every day.
Yeah. That's how it works for me. And there's actually a second layer to like memento mori that apparently they used to say to like people that had high up in power. People would say like, remember that you're mortal, like you're one of us, kind of thing. And I think that's pretty grounding too. So that's like the second layer to it that I think is pretty grounding too.
Wow, that's great. You have
Yeah.
any other tats or any that you wish to share?
None that I wish to share.
Okay.
Maybe offline.
Very fair.
Yeah.
We've talked about, you mentioned the compound effect. I think that's Darren Hardy. That's a great book.
Yeah.
That's a great resource. I'd love to get into some others. I imagine that you've got some good ones up your sleeves. So any books that have made an impact? They could be sales, they could be personal development, they could be something completely different, but anything that stand out?
Yeah, I really don't even like sales books, to be honest.
Yeah.
They're just because sales changes so quick, like it gets outdated very quickly, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So my favorite books to read are more so on like psychology, or like I do like biographies as well. Probably my two favorite books. Actually, I'll recommend three. I think my three favorite books are Atomic Habits by James Clear. That one's incredible. Classic, How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Yep.
I want to read that more. I want to continue to reread that. And then what was the third one? Grit is a good one. Basically on the basically on the concept of like growth versus like a fixed mindset.
Those are all great. Those are all, I mean, you can't miss with any of them.
Yeah.
Atomic Habits has been brought up a lot on this podcast by guests, and
Really?
it's just I love it because there's something to be said about kind of reading something that's inspiring and getting you fired up. And then like that book is just so tactical. That's just like, here's the science behind like the habit. Here's how you build it. And then here's why like doing that small habit, like the compound effect, is going to lead to major results in the future. And I just love how kind of like blunt he is in that approach.
Yeah. There's also another good book that's on the topic of habits called The Power of Habit by Charles Dewick. That was like well before Atomic Habits, and they even reference him in that book too. And that one's really good too. It's not as tactical, but it's more so of like how habits are formed, how to break habits, how the mind works and stuff like that. So it's pretty good.
How about on other forms of learning? I'm not sure if you're a podcast guy or if you follow different people on LinkedIn or YouTube or anything like that, but anywhere else that you've been tuning in that's been helpful for you?
Yeah, I enjoy podcasts a lot. I think, like I said, a lot of the stuff that I'm like trying to focus on is more so like outside of sales, because I think it helps directly with my day-to-day.
Yeah. Any topic's fair game.
Yeah. On Purpose with Jay Shetty is really good. School of Greatness with Lewis Howes. And then I actually have some that are just like more news stuff. There's one called Group Chat that I like. Yeah. So I'm big into podcasts for sure. What about you? There
was like a 9-day span, like a couple of years ago, and I was like checking Lewis Howes out and like his studio and all that shit. And he's got all these amazing guests. I'm like, I'm going to do that. I'm going to quit my job. I'm going to go be Lewis Howes. And then obviously I didn't make that decision. But I'm a fan.
Yeah, he's good.
For me, I mean, similarly, I don't really listen to sales podcasts personally. I think the only two that I would say are even worth people's time, other than this one, are John Barros, Make It Habit Mondays, because I'm a big fan of him. And I like 30 Minutes to President's Club with Armand and Nick. Those guys are legit. Have you been on that? I feel like you have.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
They're cool. And then otherwise, I go all over. I listen to some sports ones. I listen to some personal development, like, I'd listen to the School of Greatness is one. I'm a fan of Jocko Willink, who's a ex-Navy SEAL. Tim Ferriss has personal development stuff on there. And then every once in a while, I'm a big hip hop guy.
Me too.
So I listen to a couple hip hop podcasts where they like break down albums.
Which one? Dissect?
Dissect is great. And then I listened to another one called No Skips.
Oh, okay. I've heard of No Skips. I haven't listened to it yet though.
Which is a little bit more like it's deep. Dissect is like, that's like nerdy. That's like as nerdy as I've ever heard about music, and
Yeah.
incredible. No Skips is a little bit more like, there's a lot of comic relief. It's funny,
Mm.
but they also break it down too. So it's cool. I would definitely recommend that too.
So what's your favorite hip hop album of all time?
The best, I mean, oof, I was gonna ask you something like that. Okay, now we flipped the I mean, I think Illmatic
Oh,
by Nas or
MX,
Ready
yeah.
to Die
Hmm.
are like the top two. The one that I probably listened to the most, just based on how I grew up, was the Slim Shady LP by Eminem,
Yeah.
because I was obsessed with Eminem in middle
Uh-huh.
school. Like, I listened to him every single day. How about you?
Yeah, Illmatic's up there for me. Honestly, my answer might be basic, but this is like more new age hip hop. But My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy by Kanye.
Oh,
That's just I just love Kanye. I'm a huge Kanye fan. So that album is just like gospel to me. My other favorite hip hop album is Get Rich or Die Trying by 50 Cent.
oh man.
Yeah.
Talk about a good audiobook, by the way, 50 cents if you haven't listened to it.
Oh, I have not. That's a good recommendation, actually.
It's good, man. It's good. He talks just about, you know, music, but also just like, he's up at 4:30, like doing his workouts, and he's invested in vitamin water and all this shit. It's good, dude.
I'm gonna add that to my list actually, because that 50 Cent is great. That album, I put that album on like way too much. Like before a call, I put that out. I literally will play. What's that? No, I'm blanking on the song. If I Can't, that's like my go-to song on the
Yeah.
album before a big call, and it just pumps me up. I love it.
Yeah. Something like him, something like Lil Wayne,
Yeah, Carter
even
too.
you, yeah, something like that. Like Kanye. The reason I love Kanye is like, he's so like, you just tell how much he believes in himself. You know what I mean? Like, he
Yeah,
thinks he can do anything, and so when he puts that in a song, you're like, fuck yeah, like, let's go.
his
So
uh
I yeah,
his
go ahead.
documentary just came out yesterday. Kanye on
On
Netflix.
what?
On Netflix,
Whoa.
it's really good.
I have plans tonight now, Vin.
It's really good, dude. They were following him since he was like 19. Like he had a cameraman. They started filming a documentary about him before he was big because he knew
No
because
kidding.
he believed that much in himself. He was like, I'm gonna blow up. And it's like the first episode they only released it, and he's just like going to record labels and like trying to pitch his music. And he was playing like Jesus Walks, All Falls Down to these people, and they were just like, no. Like, how do you not
Wow.
sign him after that? And it was just like crazy to think like he's like this like bigger than life guy. And then you see
Yeah.
him at like 18, 19 years old with like retainers in, and
Yeah.
no one's giving him the time of day. It's crazy.
Wow. I'm definitely gonna have to watch that. I heard he used to, like, he'd go into conference rooms and he'd like get up on the table like when he started playing his music, so he'd like be getting into it during the meeting.
I believe
That's
it.
crazy. That's crazy. And you're a basketball guy, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm pretty into
All right.
basketball too.
You were like, had pro dreams. I don't know how legit that was, but
No, it was just that was a joke on my
uh,
I mean, I think every kid had pro dreams at some
yeah,
point,
yeah, yeah, for sure.
You
I
know,
didn't know if he was like
shooting
in
the
high
last shot,
school.
in your driveway. Like everyone has pro dreams.
Yeah, yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Who are your top five? I know you're a Knicks guy, but who are your top five players all time?
Um, all
Favorite.
time. Oh, is this like favorite or like
Your your
statistically?
your favorite.
Okay, so this is gonna like you might hate me for this. My favorite player is Chris Paul.
Oh, I like Chris Paul.
Okay, he's not. Yeah, he's
People
polarizing.
don't
So
like him though.
people hate. Sometimes they get angry at me when I tell people that.
I don't get
um,
why.
he is my favorite player. I go to. He obviously played for mostly, actually all only West Coast teams, so it's kind of
Yeah.
hard to see him live. Anytime he was playing the Knicks or the Nets, I was there. So I've seen him play a ton of times. I actually flew to see him a few times too.
Wow.
Huge Chris Paul fan. I'm loving what they're doing this year with the Suns.
I just coincidentally I was in Scottsdale, Phoenix for a few days and went to the game on. I stayed a couple extra days and went to the game on Tuesday night. So that was the first time I saw him live.
Who'd they
Him
play?
and Devin Booker. The Clippers.
Oh, that was a good game.
Yeah, they won by, it was only a handful of points. It was tight.
That was a good game.
All right, so he's one. Who are the other four?
Oh man, this is gonna be tough. I mean, love watching Kobe. I think everyone did. Who else did I like? I used to like a lot of the small guards because I was very small growing up and I was a guard. So I used to watch a
Yeah,
lot of so I used to like love watching like highlight tapes of like Jamal Crawford.
nice.
I used to like watching highlights of like Mike Bibby. pretty much all the
Yeah.
small guards that were like good at handling the ball. I used to just
Yeah.
love watching Jason Kidd,
Yeah.
Tim Hardaway.
Yeah.
That's basically, I used to just watch YouTube compilations of just like crossovers, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. I love it.
Yeah.
I was the same way. And I still haven't grown. I'm still waiting for my growth spurt, but I haven't hit it yet.
Yeah. Still, we still have the hoop dreams. You can't get rid of them just yet.
It's never too late.
It's never too
Um,
late.
Man, so what's the so to get back to sales before we sign off. So you first year AE smashed it, President's Club. Second year AE doubled your revenue back to President's Club. This is your third year. What's the mentality like? Have you have you made any changes or like any like are you adding anything to the arsenal right now that you think is going to make a big difference for 2022 or what's top of mind?
Yeah, man. I'm still so early into my like actual selling career. So I'm still learning a ton. There's still so many gaps like that I've noticed in my sales process that I'm really trying to hone in on. And I think this year, well, not to like go on the Demandbase talk track, but Demandbase released like a bunch of new products and a new kind
Yeah.
of rebrand. So there's a lot of like training and learning I need to do product wise.
Mm-hmm.
And this year, my goal is to like sell those new products that we now have because they'll be actually a larger ticket price. So that's a big focus of mine. But in terms of like the sales practices, um, trying to get better at actually scheduling next steps.
Yeah.
I was like doing a really good job at that. And I think everyone maybe falls into this where like you just want to finish your demo and then at the end of the call, you're like scrambling.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, my last few calls that's been happening to me. And I was doing a good job at it and then I slipped away from it. So now I know I need to focus back on that. Continuing to multi-thread. And then also trying to leverage more references. I think that's not something I've done a lot in the past, but I think I want to try to start incorporating that more.
It's crazy how, sales, just like anything else, like the fundamentals, like if you get next steps on every call and you've got however many people you need to multi-thread, 3, 4, 5, whatever it is, and you're just handling some of those things and you got the right titles in the room, it's crazy how often like just focusing on those like big rocks that are like so simple get you to where you need to be. And like there's all this other stuff that can help and cross you over the line and some flashy stuff, but man, the fundamentals can get you so far.
Yeah. It's like everything. Like I think we all know what we need to do, right?
Yeah.
Like you can ask anyone what's the best way to close this deal you're working, and they'll tell you everything you need to do. It's just like putting it to practice. It's kind of like you want to lose 10 pounds. What should you be doing? You know what you should be doing, but
Yeah.
you don't want to really follow that. So that's the hardest thing, is just like being consistent, sticking to the plan. That's the hardest thing. And then just like honing the skill. So scheduling next steps, there's a skill to that. You should be doing it, but it's like, okay, what's the best way to do that? What call should we schedule as a next step? That's something that I kind of am working on. There's a lot of ways we can take it. Demandbase, our sales cycles. There's like a million different use cases. I'm sure you even have a lot more too at Gong. So it's just like, okay, what should I recommend as the next step that they would agree to, kind of thing. And that's trial and error, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's a great point, because it's if you have multiple products or multiple use cases you solve with your product, they're looking to you, to be the expert as the salesperson, right? Like no one should know the process better than you. You've sold however many deals, the product back and forth. They don't. So it's just a good call to action for a salesperson. Like at the end of the call, it's not just like, hey, let's set up another call, but like why and with who and like what are they going to get out of it? I think it's just that's a great point.
Yeah. And again, I think like everything I mentioned today is like, yeah, I do that, but I'm also trying to work on it at the same time. And I think every salesperson is in the same boat.
We're not experts, but
we try our best.
Sharing the journey.
Yeah, we try our best.
Man, this is a great conversation. I got to ask before I let you go, who next do you want to see come on this podcast?
Ooh, who next? I'll recommend my buddy Anthony Natoli.
Anthony Natoli. I just met him.
Oh, did you?
I just met him last week.
Yeah,
he's a good dude.
He's a buddy of mine. He's been really cranking out some LinkedIn content. He has a pretty good story too. That I'll let him dive down that story. But that's who I'd recommend. I'll give him a plug.
Nice. Were you buddies before sales, or you just met on LinkedIn?
No, he was at Demandbase. We worked at Demandbase together.
Oh, okay,
and
gotcha.
he's a Jersey guy. We stick together.
That's what I figured. I knew
Yeah.
that. I could figure that. The
Yeah.
Italian Jersey, like I knew there was some sort of connection going
Yeah.
on there.
Instant connection.
Yeah, I love it, man. Cool. Well, before we go, definitely, yeah, I could not more highly recommend that everyone, connect and follow you on LinkedIn. I put out great content there, if it's daily or at least multiple times per week. I know you're doing some new shit going on TikTok, on Twitter. You're kind of all over the place. So
Yeah.
maybe just let us know, like, what are the best places to hit you up and learn more about you if they want to.
Yeah, I would say LinkedIn's the best place. I'm posting there twice a week. I'm trying to at least. Every other platform is at Vin Matano, one word. Instagram, TikTok, Twitter. I've been this year. I'm focusing on creating more content. So, hopefully I stick to that, and maybe you guys can hold me accountable.
Awesome, man. Vin, I appreciate you coming on, man.
Cool. Thanks, Tom. Appreciate it.